We did it! Yeah! Let's get it. All right. Yeah. Welcome to the Stock Stories podcast. My name is Alex Mason, and I am your host and stock storyteller. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's a special bonus episode. If you can't already tell, I'm pretty hyped up. I'm so excited because this is just going to be a different episode today. We're not going to talk about particular companies. We're not going to talk about mental models, but I did want to share something very important in my personal journey that I hope inspires and helps you. Today, we're going to talk about something very special. Let's go ahead and get right into it. All right. Yes. And again, my name is Alex Mason. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, this is a show where we usually decode the business behind the stock and explore mental models in order to help you become a better investor. And that is what we do every single Wednesday on this show without fail. But today is a special day, and I'm going to explain why. So if you're more into that, you were expecting a company analysis or a mental model explanation or decoding a business, this is not the episode for you. We have plenty of episodes in the archive that you can check out if you're into that. So no worries there. But if you do want to learn a little bit more about my personal journey and a little bit more about the milestone that my wife and I have finally reached, then keep on listening. So what am I talking about? Why am I so excited today? It is because I am finally sharing that my wife and I have finally become financially independent. Yes, we've finally done it. We have invested our way to this point where if we didn't want to, we wouldn't have to work anymore. We wouldn't have to trade time for money for someone else. And we did it. I mean, it's hard to really explain how I'm feeling right now because it's kind of come full circle, all of these years of working and saving. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. What exactly do I mean when I'm saying we're financially independent? So we do not have to work anymore if we did not want to. That's basically what it means, plain and simple. I could quit my job tomorrow if I wanted to, which I'm not doing, and I'll explain that in a moment. But I could, if I wanted to, just quit my job tomorrow. My wife actually already quit her job a couple of years ago. That's not something that I've shared publicly, really. But she already quit. I haven't quit yet. I'm still working in my typical, my job as an engineer. So I'm working there, but we don't have to anymore. We've reached the point where our money takes care of us. Our investments take care of us. And if you have any understanding of why I do what I do, why I'm podcasting and going through these companies and mental models and sharing all this with you, it's because I'm just so passionate about the field of investing. But it's not investing itself, right? It's not just the technical stuff about stocks and balance sheets and company growth rates and industry competition. That is fascinating to me at an intellectual level and probably is to you too, which is why you listen to this show. But even more than that, it's the reason behind it. It's the why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why are you listening? Why do you even care? And are you trying to find these companies to invest in? Why are you trying to invest wisely? Why am I trying to do the same thing? We're doing it because we want to be financially free. We want to be financially free. We don't want to have to necessarily work for a paycheck, or even if we're cool with working for a paycheck, we don't want that to be our only source of wealth or income. And that is why investing is so powerful, because as we've talked about time and time again on this show over the years, when you invest your money, it compounds over time. It compounds over time. So even if you start small at just a little bit amount of money every paycheck or every month, whatever it is for you, it builds and builds over time, and the growth of compound returns will eventually come through and benefit you and your family. And that's exactly what happened to me. It's exactly what happened to my wife and I. We've been working and saving and investing for years, and it just kind of hit us the other day, honestly. Like, we realized we actually have hit this milestone, last year, I think. Even it wasn't even this year. So we've been financially independent for over a year, and we were just so focused on kind of just working hard, grinding, doing what we do, and enjoying life that we didn't even sit back to do the numbers to realize, oh, hey, like I think we're good now. But we did the numbers, and that's basically what happened. And to get a little bit more concrete with it, a little bit more technical to describe exactly what I mean, like, how do you know how much money you need in your investment portfolio to be at a place where you don't have to work again? Well, there's a couple ways you can look at it. One way to look at it is by looking at the income that you get from dividends, for example. There are some people who focus exclusively on dividend investing, only invest in income-oriented assets like real estate investment trusts or bonds, blue chip stocks, things like that. And I think that can be an excellent way to go. But that is something where your portfolio is literally throwing off enough passive income for you to not have to work again. That's not what I'm talking about in the situation with my wife and I. What I'm talking about is purely from a net worth wealth perspective, from a portfolio perspective of having 25 times our annual expenses in investments. And where that comes from is this famous study. If you're not familiar with it, it's called the Trinity Study. You can look it up. It is basically an academic exploration of the question, how much does someone need to invest in order to withdraw money perpetually from their portfolio in order to survive financially during retirement, basically. And effectively what this paper and other research similar to it has concluded is if you are invested in assets that grow much quicker than inflation, mainly stocks, and then also I think the study specifically looks at combinations of stocks and bonds, that you can effectively draw based on back testing. There's a Monte Carlo analysis that was done to justify this mathematically. But basically, the long and short of it is, if you withdraw about 4% of your portfolio every year and use that as income, that you can use that perpetually throughout your life and you won't run out of money, or at least the probability of you running out of money from your portfolio is very, very small. And intuitively, this makes sense, right? Because in most years, the stock market in general, let's just talk about the stock market for a moment. The stock market in general tends to grow on average, historically. We don't know if this will be the case in the future necessarily, but historically has grown at about 10% on average year over year. Now, many academics argue about this. Some people say it's 12% annual growth historically. Some people say it's 8%. It's kind of like semantics in a way. But by and large, that's kind of the number that I use. 10% historical growth of the S&P 500 over the past several decades. So think about that. If you have a portfolio comprised mainly of stocks, which my family does, then you can withdraw 4% in virtually every year And of course, the market has down years. That's a fact also. But over the long run, as long as you're not taking too much out of your portfolio in any given year, you can live off of that year after year after year, decade after decade. And then, of course, one thing that the Trinity study does not really address is, of course, if the market does go down, what are the behavioral changes as far as withdrawing your money? Of course, you can taper off your withdrawals if the market does go down and just decide to find other ways to earn income. But anyway, I'm getting into the weeds here. The point is that if you have 25 times your expenses, which equates to a 4% withdrawal rate of your portfolio, if you have 25 times your expenses in good assets, basically stocks, or some combination of higher growing investments that beat inflation, you should be able to historically live off of that money perpetually, as long as you don't take more than 4% a year off of it. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that incredible? Like, that is some amazing knowledge right there. And it's not something that I tend to talk about because it's talked about in many other circles within the personal finance and investing and financial independent retire early community, that I don't really talk about too much because we're really focused on stocks here. But if we zoom out of the investment picture for a moment, we see that that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to invest to create wealth, to create income, to live better lives for ourselves and for our family, and even for future generations. So my wife and I have just hit this point, and it feels pretty amazing. Like, honestly, sometimes I don't even really feel like it's real, because in many respects, we're living the same lives that we have been living. Nothing materially has really changed on a day-to-day basis. But even then, when I look back over year to year or every couple of years back in history, I can see how big things have changed in our lives. So it's helpful to zoom in and then zoom out of your life in order to see how those kinds of changes materialize. So I want to take a moment to talk about how we got here. How did we actually get to the point where we have become financially independent? And as of the time I'm recording this, I'm 31 years old. And so we hit financial independence at 30. We hit it last year. And man, I feel really grateful. I just feel really blessed to be in this position, because there's a lot of good things that I want to do in the world for myself, for my family, for my community. And hitting this milestone is indicative of being able to live out those dreams, of being able to help people in a way that I've never been able to help people before. So that's really that really means a lot to me. And so for you listening to this, I want to do everything in my power to get you here. I want to get you here, and I want you to go beyond here too. I want you to be so wealthy that you can impact so many lives that it's just incredible. So how did we do it? Because I want to serve in a way as a case study for myself. You know, on this show, we usually do company case studies. Well, today, let's do a little bit of a case study on me and my family. Like, how did we get here? Because I want you to learn those lessons. So first of all, we live below our means. We live below our means always. We've never overextended ourselves unnecessarily, except at the very beginning of our financial journey when we realized we were making some big mistakes with money. But we fortunately were able to self-correct very quickly and begin investing and paying off debt and learning those lessons early. So essentially, live below your means. You can never, ever get wealthy if you live above your means consistently. Because if you do that, you're going to get further into debts. You're going to drain all of your liquidity. You're not going to be building assets. You're going to be moving in the wrong direction as far as investing. So in order to be able to invest effectively, that's pretty much a prerequisite. You have to live below your means. And if you're listening to this show, you probably already have that pat down. You don't necessarily need me to tell you that, but it's one of those basic fundamental lessons that I think is worth repeating, because it is a behavior that so many people that I've met and who I have observed in this life so far have failed to adhere to that principle, and it just really gets them into trouble, and it robs them of achieving their dreams in many ways. So always live below your means. The next thing I would say is my wife and I focused heavily on increasing our skills and increasing our income over time. Our household income, we've always been very careful about managing it, about trying to grow it over time, and not making silly decisions that would impact our income in a big way. So not quitting our jobs too early, or being careful with our career moves and what we were doing related to that. Those kinds of decisions have a big impact, because if you're able to increase your income, you're able to invest more. And the beautiful thing about increasing your income is you can both spend more money and save more money at the same time. You can spend more money and save more money at the same time if you plan it well. So if you're judicious about how you approach your finances. So focusing on building skills that are valuable, that people are willing to pay for, has been critical to us. We always make sure that we worked hard, always make sure that we were working smart. And yeah, we made some mistakes along the way, but all in all, we increased our income year after year after year. And there are some years where our income went down, but we were aware that it was going down. We knew the reasons why. We were willing to work hard to mitigate that. So there's different aspects of this that you can manage in your personal finances with your family. Is always focus on increasing your skills, because skills ultimately are what bring more income. And when you have more income, you have more power to invest. And then the next thing that we did is we invested consistently. Invest consistently. I cannot emphasize this enough. This was absolutely critical for our success. If we had done those first two things, living below our means and increasing our income, that would be great. We would have more piles of cash sitting in our savings account, but money sitting in the savings account is not what makes people wealthy. It may make them financially stable. They can adapt to changing conditions. They can weather crises much more effectively than most people. And those are all great things. But in order to get to that next level, you have to put your money to work. And you have to do that on a regular basis. So from the very first paycheck I received at my very first full-time job many years ago, and we started this journey back in 2012, so almost a decade ago, we have consistently put money aside into good investments. And I'm talking about the stock market here, okay? So we have consistently poured money into the stock market from the very beginning. Now, of course, depending on where you're at in your particular journey, you may need to allocate money differently depending on your situation. For example, if you have a lot of debt, you might want to focus on paying that off first. Or maybe you have certain medical situations, or you have a child getting ready to go to college. These are all different considerations that you really need to figure out. And that takes a lot of personalized, specialized planning that I'm not equipped to give you here. But I can say that whatever you do, find a way to invest consistently, because investing consistently is what gets that power of compounding on your side. It gets compounding on your side. And the thing is, you don't even really realize how well it's working until it's already happened years down the road. I can tell you that for the first few years of my wife and I's journey, we were investing consistently, but we weren't doing it as much as we wanted to, because we were really focused on paying off debt. That was a really big focus for us. We wanted to get in a better situation as far as our liquidity and as far as our just general balance sheet of our personal household. So we were focused on that first, but we were still investing some money on the side just to get those assets building gradually. And then once we had done that, by that point, probably around 2016, so about the first 4 years, we were just really focused on frugality, debt payoff, investing, increasing our skills, getting started in our careers, doing all of those good things. And then kind of at that point, that was a major turning point for us once we became completely debt free. By then our incomes had grown, we had more liquidity, and then we were like, okay, now we're ready to just go in on this investing stuff. And that's when we really started investing more heavily in the stock market. And then fast forward 2 years later, that's when I started this show, Stock Stories, and focused more on individual stocks as opposed to index funds, which we had been investing in almost exclusively up until that point. So we really began to pivot from those essentials to just investing consistently and then investing more every single month. And that helped amplify our results. So you have to invest consistently in order to see compound returns. And I can tell you that those first 4 years of investing, it didn't really seem like much was happening, to be honest with you. It was just like, okay, here's this little bit of money coming from my paycheck going into this investment account. All right, sounds great. I'm like, am I rich yet? And the answer is always no. No, you're not there yet. You're not there yet. And I remember just feeling a sense of frustration some days because I just felt like I wanted us to go faster. I wanted us to get there sooner. So definitely be patient, but make sure you are always investing consistently because that consistency will build over time. It will build over time. And so maybe around the 4 or 5 year mark into our journey, that's when we started seeing some better results as far as the actual growth of our assets. And it was still very small. Don't get me wrong. It was still very small, but it was enough to where we felt like, okay, we can do this. And if you remember, if you've been a listener to the show for a while now, I had an episode, I think it was over a year ago now, where I had this mental model that I shared with you called the first 200,000 is the hardest. The first $200,000 that you make is the hardest because you really just have to hustle for it. You don't really have compounding working on your side yet. You're just scrimping, you're saving, you're finding ways to make money, you're stacking money dollar by dollar. And then eventually you get to a point where compounding begins to do the heavy lifting and grow your assets without too much more involvement from you. But that first $200,000 is hard. And I adapted that from a Charlie Munger quote where he said several decades ago that the first $100,000 is extremely difficult, but you've got to do it. You've got to find a way to accumulate that capital if you want to ultimately build it into more over time. And of course, I adjusted for inflation since he made that comment many decades ago. And I just went ahead and said, hey, $200,000, that's the hardest because in my personal experience, in my wife's experience, that was really kind of the turning point for us. At least that's how I felt. Another point that I want to make is that beyond investing consistently, which was really a key part of our journey, was investing wisely, investing in things that we understood. Invest in things that you understand. Don't go off buying all this stuff that the financial media loves to talk about just because it's hot right now. Don't do that. As much as I love learning things from CNBC and Yahoo Finance and all the other financial media outlets, they're all great. But at the end of the day, a lot of times the subject matter of these websites, of these television channels is just a bunch of things that are going to distract you. Don't get too distracted. Focus on investments you can understand. This is what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger have talked about for years. Focus on investments that you know and understand. If a friend comes to you and gives you a stock tip about some hot biotech company and you know nothing about biotechnology, why would you ever invest in that? Don't do it. If a friend comes to you and says, hey, I think Bitcoin is the hottest thing, you should invest in Bitcoin. If you don't know anything about Bitcoin, don't invest in Bitcoin. I have not invested in Bitcoin, and maybe I'm missing out on some big thing. Maybe, I don't know. I think it's a potentially groundbreaking technology from the little bit that I've researched it, but I personally don't feel like I really understand it as an investment enough to say, okay, I'm going to commit capital to it, even to speculate. So I haven't invested in Bitcoin. I focused on stocks. I understand stocks. I understand businesses. So that is what we choose to focus a good portion of our capital on, is the stock market. So focus on what you can understand. Don't invest in things that you don't understand. And frankly, I've made mistakes here too. I've invested in stocks that I thought I understood. I thought I really knew what was going on with them and that I was buying at a good price. Well, no, I wasn't buying at a good price, and I made some mistakes. So you're going to make mistakes too, but just keep going. Make sure you're investing wisely, investing in things that you understand. And if you don't understand it, educate yourself. It's worth it to educate yourself on investments that you're interested in so that you are more empowered to make those decisions. And that is really my role with this show, is to help empower you with this step of the process, to help empower you with knowledge of all of these companies, of how these business models work, of these mental models, so that you can use them as tools in your own decision-making process so that you can build your family's wealth. So that's my role here with you on this show. So those are the main things. If I was to boil it down, live below your means, increase your skills and your income, invest consistently, and then invest wisely in things that you understand. Now, if you do those 4 things, you're going to have success. You're going to have a lot more success than a lot of other people will, because you're focused and being intentional with how you're doing with your finances. Now, notice that only one of those 4 things in any way has to do with the technical aspects of investing. And it's that last one: invest in things that you understand. Those are the things like understanding fundamental analysis, learning how a company's business model works, understanding valuation. All of those things that we talk about on the show all fall into that last piece of investing wisely, because then you'll get a higher rate of return with lower risk. You can grow your money and grow your capital in a quicker and more sustainable way than otherwise. So that is that aspect. But the first 3 things that I mentioned, those are purely all behavioral things. Those are not technical things at all. So it's amazing to me how much time and focus and energy people tend to put on the technical aspects of investing, which I personally love and I also spend a lot of time on, but they forget and they fail to focus on the things that are even more fundamental. So don't ever forget to focus on the fundamentals as well. Focus on living below your means. Focus on increasing your means by increasing your skills and income. Focus on investing consistently. Those are the most important things. And then once you've done that, once you have a rhythm going with your household, then now you can listen to episodes of the show and say, okay, such and such company looks interesting. Such and such company does not look interesting. Let's learn about this and that. Let's figure out the balance sheet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's when all that stuff begins to matter, is when you have that firm foundation. So get the foundation right first and then grow your base from there. That's how my wife and I did it. And yeah, we made it. We've reached financial independence, and you can too by focusing on these aspects. Another thing I want to say here before closing out the episode is that when I say invest consistently, I'm talking about investing a relatively large percentage of your income. A lot of financial advice focuses on saving 10 or 15% of your income and putting it into investments. That is fine if you're okay with a 40 to 50 year timeline for your investments to grow and create wealth for you. But if you want to do it faster, if you want to have financial freedom while you're young enough to still enjoy the benefits of that freedom, then you're going to need to come up with a different plan. And the plan that my wife and I executed was consistently saving at least 50% of our income every year, on average. I should say on average. There were years where it went up, years where it went down. But if you save and invest half of what you make, like, that's incredible. You can make so much progress so much more quickly than just putting aside a little bit here and there towards your retirement or towards your investments and waiting 30, 40 years before seeing any major benefit. You can really get the benefits of compounding much sooner, in less than a decade, if you set aside a substantial portion of your income. Now, some people may be hearing this and thinking, wow, like, that's crazy. Like, why would you do that? It seems like a lot of sacrifice. Like, okay, yeah, it is a lot of sacrifice at first, but then you get better at understanding how money works. You get more creative, you get more innovative, you increase your income, which, as I said earlier, allows you to spend more and save more at the same time. So there are ways to do this in a way that doesn't feel like a huge sacrifice or like you're being super frugal. I mean, I will admit, in the first probably maybe 2 years, 1 to 2 years of our journey, my wife and I were, I would say, super frugal by American standards. But after that, we raised our expenses significantly over the years. So it's something that you don't have to live in this super frugal scarcity mindset in order to make it happen. You can live well while investing well, as long as you're just focused on the right things. Now, this is not a typical episode, and I hope I wasn't rambling too much. I really want to make it clear that this is possible. If you have not yet reached financial independence, you can do it. You can do it. I don't care if you're young. I don't care if you're old. I don't care if you got challenges. I don't care what kinds of problems you've faced financially in the past. I don't care what your income is right now. I don't care what your career is. If you are an able-bodied person with a sound mind, especially if you live and work in a developed economy on this planet, you can achieve financial independence. It just takes intentionality. It takes knowledge of how to invest. It takes patience, and it does take some time, but it is possible, and it is life-changing. Now, that's what I have to say on this subject. I hope that you have gleaned something from this conversation. I hope that wherever you are on your financial journey, you can see that there is a point in the future that if you continue to take the actions that you are taking now, you will reach that point of financial independence. And again, I do want to say that financial independence, it's about choice. You don't have to do anything once you get to that phase. I'm still working in my traditional job right now because my wife and I, we have other goals. We have really big goals that we want for our family, for our future. And right now, that just makes the most sense for me to do and for us to do. But from a financial perspective, if I wanted to quit, I could do it right now. And that makes all the difference as far as my mindset, how I approach my work, how I approach this podcast, etc. So focus on the goal. Focus on what you really want out of life, what you really want out of your finances. Make a plan to get there. Invest consistently, invest wisely, live below your means, increase your skills and your income, and you will make progress. So I hope that I've encouraged you with this today, and I'll leave you with that. Now tune in next week as you do every single Wednesday, and I will be there with a new episode studying a company or a mental model. If you have any questions about anything that I just talked about, or you just want to share your story, I'm always here to talk with you. You can reach me by email at alex@stockstoriespodcast.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram at stockstoryteller. Either way, I'd love to have a conversation with you. So thanks for listening. Thank you so much for your support with this show. And I hope that you've learned something and felt something from this message today. Thank you.